All righty. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Prevent Email Threats with Advanced Email Security, featuring Perception Point, Acronis, and US Signal. I'm your moderator today, Lauren Pratt, Channel Marketing and Events Manager here at US Signal. Before we begin, I would like to take care of a few housekeeping items. We are hosting a Q&A session after the presentation. So please submit your questions during our webinar, and we will answer as many preceding the discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing for future viewing. We'll send that to you via email when the recording is available, and that's within 48 hours. Lastly, make sure you stick around for the entirety of our webinar for a chance to win a tailgate package giveaway, which is valued at $450. And now I would like to introduce to you today's presenters. We have four excellent speakers with us: Justin Ellison, Solutions Architect from US Signal; David Leone, Customer Success with Perception Point; Zach St. George, the Director of Sales from Perception Point; and Ernie Hilborn, Partner Enablement Manager with Acronis. Today, we will cover a US Signal overview, the need for cloud-based email security, advanced email security at a glance, as well as the benefits of advanced email security, and then we'll finish up with a demo. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Justin Ellison to start us off.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Lauren. And I will be quick here. I want to talk about US Signal on the front end here, but I want to get out of the way and leave time for Perception Point and Acronis to get into the fun stuff, the technical pieces that we like to cover. So just very quickly, a little bit more about myself. So I've been at US Signal for the last 7 years, and it's been amazing to see the evolution of the organization as we continue to innovate our product in services portfolio set. My role as solution architect is to partner with our customers and walk them through the technical buy-in process. But more importantly, what my leadership asked me to do is to make sound technical advice to our customers. So what that means, right, is we've got a team of individuals on the solution architect team that have cut their teeth, years and years of IT experience in industry specific verticals, right, that we can pull expertise from to provide that technical expertise to our customers. And I'll be very brief here on the US Signal overview because we want to cover the advanced security pieces here, but again, we're a data center services provider based out of Grand Rapids, and data center services provider doesn't really encapsulate the breadth of services that we've continued to evolve over the last 22 years of being in business. So if we go back to 2000, we were solely focused on a network carrier, right? So we like to use the term carrier's carrier. So many of our customers were the Comcast and AT&Ts of the world. But as we continue to invest in our network assets early on in the organization, our customers began to ask US Signal, right, for more services. And part of that evolution, right, was to move into co-location and data center space. Because what we do well, right, is we partner with customers so they can focus on their core competencies while they lean on a service provider like US Signal to help them keep the lights on, right? So many customers wanted to get out of the data center space at that point, right? They didn't want to worry about power and cooling and HVAC, right? And as that continued to evolve and IT continued to evolve, and with our footprint of network in the Midwest, right, customers began to ask us, further than just data center services, right, moving into infrastructure as a service that's based on VMware, data protection as a service, and really over the last couple of years, we focused on growing our security portfolio business as part of that evolution. Because as we moved right into the IaaS space, our customers, their need, right, of consuming audited, secure services greatly increased, right? So standards such as SOC or PCI, NIST, right? That was just a requirement that we had to adhere to from a service provider standpoint. If you want to go on, Lauren. We'll throw some alphabet soup at you here for a second. again, so as our customer base continued to evolve, right, and IT continued to evolve, we had to stand up a dedicated security team that was focused on one, our internal security controls from an organization standpoint, also the customer facing services that we were now providing to our end customers, right? The infrastructure as a service, the disaster recovery as a service, and just the adherence to security standards, right? We needed to stand up that internal security team, and our customer base, right? Because of the breadth of customers and different verticals that that we were supporting, right? They obviously had to adhere to certain security standards that that we've implemented within our customer-facing services. You know, for example, our data centers and IS services, right, are audited to SOC and HIPAA and PCI, and we maintain those compliances on behalf, right, of our customers that move into services from a service provider like US Signal. You want to continue on, Lauren? Again, don't want to spend a lot of time here because the focus is advanced email security, but as we were able to leverage that internal security team, right, you know, they have been stood up for 7, 8 years at this point, really focusing on process and disciplines, right, on the security side, but on the internal side, our customers have begun to ask us, right, what can you do on the security front? So we've put a lot of investment to take that internal team and, again, driven by customer demand, shift them into external focusing, product sets. So when I think about security services, I like to sort of put it into 2 different buckets, right? The reactive side and the proactive side. And we spent a lot of years on the reactive side, right? So services such as backup as a service, with Acronis being one of our great partners there, and disaster recovery as a service, right? So if there was an event, what do we have in place to be able to recover from that particular event? With this shift into external security services, we put a lot of due focus, right, on the proactive side, right? So what services should and can an organization put in place to ensure from a security landscape that they are protected? So when we look at, obviously we're talking about advanced email security with this particular webinar, but again, that's just a component, right, of a larger security portfolio that organizations to be taking into account as they take a look at their overall security strategy. And what sets US Signal apart? Again, it's not just the product, right, that you're purchasing from US Signal. What you're purchasing is that that team, right, of dedicated individuals from a security operations center that are available 24/7 by 365, right? They know the tools, they've had it in place for many, many years, right? And we're even seeing when we work with customers from a cyber insurance perspective that they're starting to ask questions of, hey, are you working with a third-party provider to provide these services as part of your overall security portfolio, right? Because they know that organizations, if you're looking at, standing up your own security operations center, right? Obviously, that's very expensive. You might not have the expertise, right, to take a look at all of those alerts that the tools are generating. So it's important, right, to leverage a service provider like US Signal that has that expertise. And again, back to the network side of things, right? Because of our breadth of network in the Midwest here, we're able to provide these services different than other organizations, right? As they layer on other infrastructure services that we provide to customers, disaster recovery services that we provide to customers. All right, let's just quickly talk about just the tremendous shift that we've seen across our customer base into shifting into cloud-based email security. So I cut my teeth many, many years ago on the MSP side when BPOS, Microsoft Office 365, their original offering, right, of email security. So it's obviously evolved over the last 5 to 7 years, right? And did I get muted there? Apologize there. Interesting statistic. What we see is, 71% of organizations are already making or have made the shift into cloud-based email services, right? Obviously, the two big main players in this space, Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. There are a lot of other providers in that space. We're not seeing a lot of use cases, right, or valid use cases for a customer to maintain Exchange on premises anymore, right? It's expensive. It's got a increased attack surface because you're having to manage not only the email side of things, but the infrastructure side of things, the operating system, the application. So that increases that general attack surface for email. And you've got to have the expertise, right, to manage these email platforms. So there's not a lot of use cases to maintain on premises. But what we see, right, is even with the shift into cloud-based email, that doesn't solve the inherent security problem from a email protection standpoint. And Laura, you can go to the next slide. Most customers, once they get into that environment, right, they're making the choice not to maintain or to only leverage, right, the security offerings that are built into Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, right? One, it might not meet the requirements from a security perspective, or two, they just need to have a higher level of protection, right, into email. Obviously, email is the #1 attack vector, right, that we see from a security threat landscape. It's a direct source to humans, right? And we make terrible decisions. So you send an email into a human, right, and they're going to click on something in that, maybe in the link that could be patient zero, right, of a cyber security incident. So we see a lot of organizations with the number of emails that are malicious, right? 101 out of 412. We see a lot of organizations start to look at layer on third-party tools to protect the email ingress egress to ensure that malicious activity isn't occurring on the email side of things. And just a couple of quick points here. What we're trying to solve, obviously we've seen with the evolution of the security threat landscape, right? It seems like there's a tool for everything, right? 45 individualized tools, right, on average in a single organization. So there's just general tool sprawl, right? And that's hard to manage and maintain. So as you start to look at key critical pieces that you can unbolt from your security operations, right, and leverage a service provider, one that's going to reduce the overhead, right, of that particular discipline, right? But also it's going to reduce the noise, right? With all of this tool spread, it's generating thousands and thousands of alerts, right, that need to be investigated, or else that tool, right, isn't as effective as it possibly could be. So what we see is most organizations don't investigate all of the alerts that their tools are generating, right? One, it's expensive, it's time consuming. So being able to leverage a service provider like USignal that has eyes on glass and can investigate those alerts, right, obviously allows an organization to shift their focus on, again, what they do best. And very quickly here on the advanced email security side, from a perception point standpoint and how USignal has taken that product and productized it, right? What we have seen from a technical perspective is, perception point is leaps and bounds ahead of other providers in this space, right? And I'll let the perception point folks dig into the technical pieces on what that looks like from and we'll get into the demo where you'll see that. But it's a 7 layers of analysis, right? To where they're taking a look at 0-day type activity, phishing, business email compromise, account takeover, lateral phishing, advanced persistent threat. So from a breadth of what it's looking at, is just again far in advance of what other providers in the space have implemented in their tool sets. From a US Signal standpoint, it can be managed or unmanaged. We've got a lot of customers in the partner space, right, that already leverage the Acronis platform as backup as a service. And this platform is integrated directly within that portal. So we've seen that partners are able to easily consume this if they don't want it managed from a US Signal standpoint. It works with Microsoft 365, Exchange, if you still are running an Exchange on-premise, Gmail, any cloud email service, right? I'm kind of a nerd and I've got my own domain. So when we stood this up as a product and being the curious guy that I am, I wanted to see how quickly I could set this up, just from put myself into the customer's shoes, right? If I wanted to implement this, what does that implementation look like? I think I had this up in 15 minutes, right, at max, and was protecting my domain, right, with Perception Point on the front end. That's because it doesn't require any MX record changes. All of it's done with transport rules in Office 365. There are ways to protect email services with MX record changes if that is necessary, such as on-premises Exchange. What you'll also see in the demo, right, is just the quick nature, right, of the analysis on the Perception Point side, and I'll let that team, dig into the technical nature and how that works. But what they see, right, is lower latency from an email perspective. It's not taking a long time to take a look at that email ingress and look at each individual email on a case-by-case basis. And just to quickly cover billing components and how that works on the US Signal side, it's just a per mailbox rate, right? So as you put this in front of Office 365 or another email service, what you're getting billed from a Perception Point perspective is just that per mailbox rate. And if you wanted that managed from US Signal, there's just additional costs associated with that management of the platform and the service level agreement that we then provide to our customers, right, on the overall platform is 99.99% SLA. So I'll take a break and I'll let the Perception Point team take over from here and get into some of the technical pieces of the product.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Justin. My name is Zach St. George, sales director here at Perception Point. Been with the company a little over 4.5 years now. So now that we've kind of established, okay, email security is important and US Signal felt compelled to offer a solution that could provide email security, what I want to do is tell you a bit more about what we're offering through Acronis with the Advanced Email Security Pack and dive into how it's different than some other email security solutions you guys might be familiar with. And then from there, I'm going to hand it off to David Leon, who is going to take you through a demo and show you some live examples of some catches that we have and what exactly the solution is doing. So starting from the top, just a little bit more about our relationship with Acronis. About a little over a year ago, we launched a partnership with them to offer the advanced email security solution. So everything that I talk about when I'm talking about Perception Point email security is what we're offering through Acronis. The partnership made a lot of sense because they're offering a great solution to many MSPs in the backup space, and they wanted to take the technology that we had put together and also pair that into their offering all inside of one console to kind of make it, a one-stop platform for MSPs that they can then serve to their end customers. So getting into what we're doing in our solution, Perception Point has been around about 5.5, 6 years now. And when we were building the solution, we obviously saw this massive shift to cloud-based email, as Justin had talked about and gave some statistics on. However, what we saw in the space was there wasn't necessarily an email security solution out there that made that smooth transition. What had been around for a while were these secure email gateways. They were a lot heavier. They caused latency. You were changing your MX record, pointing everything through these secure email gateways. They were effective with on-prem, but as everyone moved to cloud-based email, there wasn't really a lightweight, easily deployed solution that was providing great detection. So that's exactly what we aimed to do when we created our email security solution. We created a cloud-first solution. Everything is running in AWS. And the unique thing about us from a deployment standpoint is we're easily sliding into cloud-based email. So there's no MX record change required, as Justin was mentioning, and it's very easy to deploy. We're essentially just serving as another hop in the email flow. So all you really need to do when you want to enable advanced email security is create a couple routing rules and connectors. And then from there, we're sitting in line. And basically, in terms of email flow, let's say you're using Office 365, the email would hit your Office 365 tenant. It then would be routed to the Perception Point cloud, where it's going to go through all these layers, which I'll show you on the next slide here. And then from there are 3 verdicts that could occur. The first being malicious. So if the email is truly malicious and it contains something like malware, phishing, whatever it might be, we'll block that email entirely. The second verdict you'd be looking at is spam. So in the case of spam, what we're actually doing is we're sending that to the junk folder, just like Microsoft and Google are doing. I think it's extremely important to make that distinction between spam and malicious, where malicious, like I said, it's something that truly could harm the organization. Spam, you would classify more of a newsletter or some sort of junk folder, maybe a marketing email that some people might deem as valid. Others want it to go to their junk folder. So that's where we'll send that. And then the third verdict, of course, is a clean email where we'll shoot it right back to Office 365 and it will be delivered to the inbox as intended. So that's what you're looking at from kind of an email flow standpoint and the way that we deploy. It's an SMTP based solution. So it's, like I said, it's different from that traditional secure email gateway, but also different from an API based kind of next gen solution, which I'll dive into a little bit more. But that's kind of a summary of how we're deploying. In terms of key differentiators, I think there are 3 things to touch on, which I'll dive a bit more into. The first being our detection, and I'll get into kind of what we're doing there, and then you'll see that firsthand with what Dave will show you with some examples. The next being speed, and how that relates to scalability and where we're sitting in the email flow. And the third piece is actually outside of the technology itself, but more what we're doing as a value-added service with what we call our incident response team. So I'll touch on each of those things over the next 10 minutes or so. You can move to the next slide now. So starting with detection, what you're looking at here on the left-hand side of the screen is our system architecture. You can see this 7-layered approach that Justin talked about, where really each layer is addressing a different type of attack that you would see. I could spend a lot of time diving into what each layer is actually doing, but I think Dave showing you examples of a few will be a bit more powerful. So I won't spend too much time getting into each one, but I will quickly highlight a few. All of this is sitting in AWS, as I mentioned. The first thing that you're going to see it hit is the spam filter. So that's just a basic spam check that we're doing on top of what Office 365 or Gmail is doing for you guys out of the box. From there, we're getting into kind of the truly malicious, or the layers that are looking for the truly malicious stuff. First, starting with the recursive unpacker. So this is a really cool layer that's actually unpacking the email essentially and following content to where it originated. The reason this is important is because oftentimes with attacks, it's not just going to be sitting in the body of the email, right? It won't just be a plain link sitting there. Maybe it's a link that redirects multiple times. Maybe you're getting a file that has links inside of it, and then those links redirect. The attacks are usually masked in some way. So the first thing that we're doing that's super important is we're unpacking all of that. We're clicking links. We're seeing where it redirects. We're opening files. We're clicking links inside of files, and really getting down to the origination of that content to make sure there's no evasion technique being used. From there, you would move on to the threat intel layer. We have our own threat intelligence as well as third-party threat intel that we're using just to kind of look for the known threats. We also have layers that are dedicated to static analysis. So that's kind of a combination of AVs that we're using where we're looking at file signatures. At the bottom of that diamond, you see layer dedicated to business email compromise. That's a huge newer issue that we see. So those are those type of emails where someone's trying to impersonate someone, buy gift cards, send money. I'm sure you guys have seen it all, but that's dedicated to those type of threats where we're looking for domain lookalike, spoofing. We're looking at what IP address the email is coming from and kind of monitoring and making sure that there's no impersonation going on. The next layer in that middle diamond to the right is our phishing layer. This is a super important layer and one that I think is a real differentiator for us. Phishing is probably the #1 issue that companies are coming to us with, looking for some sort of email security solution to address. The reason that we're different here is because we're not just operating based off of reputation like a lot of other phishing engines are doing, where in most scenarios, if a link's being scanned, most email security companies are just operating based off of the reputation of that URL. So it's only effective if that URL is a known phishing attack, if it has a bad reputation. The issue with this approach and why phishing is a big struggle for companies is because 30 to 40% of phishing attacks don't yet have a reputation. It's a new phishing attack that these reputation-based engines wouldn't catch. So to address that, what we're actually doing is we're using image-based recognition, where we're actually going to the web page and we're analyzing whatever logos and images are being used, and then we're matching that back to the actual URL that you're being brought to. So let's take Office 365, for example. That's the probably most common phishing attempt, where they're trying to get your Office 365 credentials. In this scenario, what we're able to do is recognize, okay, on this web page, here's what looks like a Microsoft login page. Here's a Microsoft logo. Now let's verify that this URL is a Microsoft URL. In the case that there's a mismatch there, we know, okay, this is likely a phishing attack, and we're able to stop it because we see that mismatch, and that's happening regardless of reputation. The very last layer to the right, which is titled our HAP layer, it stands for Hardware Assisted Platform. You can look at that as our advanced scan, where we're dynamically scanning files and URLs to look for the more advanced attacks, 0 days, end days. The unique thing about this layer is that we're doing it extremely fast, and it's also being done in a very deterministic fashion. So most sandboxes are claiming to look at these threats, but the issue with sandboxing is that there's latency and it's very dependent on the actual malware being released. This approach is we're actually essentially reverse engineering the content and looking line by line through the assembly code for the exploit technique, which is earlier on in the attack chain. So again, it's another layer that I could spend 45 minutes on, but I think the key takeaway with what we're doing here is we're able to stop advanced threats much faster than a traditional sandbox with this layer in particular, and we're doing it in much more of a deterministic fashion. So those are the layers. A few more things to mention, just generally speaking, that I think is important. We're scanning 100% of traffic through all these layers. A lot of other email security solutions are only offloading a certain portion of traffic to their more advanced engines. And I think from a detection standpoint, the fact that we're scanning everything truly helps us perform well and have these high detection rates when compared to the rest of the market. So I think it is key to note that every email is going through every single one of these layers. And we're not carving out certain layers and offering different packages. It's kind of what you see is what you get here with the advanced email security solution through Acronis. So you're being covered for every threat. The last thing before we move on, you can keep it there. Often when I mention this idea that we're scanning 100% of emails through 100% of these layers, the next question is naturally, okay, well, what about latency? This whole process that you're looking at here is taking on average between 8 to 10 seconds. There are some scans on the higher end that maybe take 30 seconds, 1 minute, but oftentimes if we are scanning for that long, the email ends up being malicious and it's not being delivered anyway. So latency doesn't quite matter there. But I think the key takeaway here is that because we're scanning so quickly, we're able to sit in line and scan all traffic pre-delivery. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, where with the secure email gateway, that's scanning everything initially, but you're worried about latency just because of the nature of the solution and specifically sandboxing. The other approach, which is API based, is more of kind of a retroactive approach. So a lot of these next gen solutions that are API based are doing a scan post delivery and then pulling the email back from the inbox. The downside of this approach is that the emails being delivered, it can be interacted with. So you kind of are at risk while that scan is being completed and until that malicious email is pulled from the inbox. As I mentioned, because we're scanning so quickly, we're taking the most secure approach where that email has been scanned before it's being delivered to the inbox. So you know if an email is sitting there, the email security solution that we're offering has marked it as clean. That being said, we do also have the ability to go in and pull an email back if there is a miss, which is very important from a remediation standpoint. Okay, you can go to the next slide here. So I talked about detection. I talked about the speed and why that's important. And the last piece, which may be our biggest differentiator, is actually outside of the technology itself, and more along the lines of a service that we're offering. So every customer that consumes advanced email security through Acronis is also entitled to using our incident response team. This team you can look at as a team of cyber analysts that's proactively monitoring the malicious traffic and then taking appropriate actions based on what they're seeing to optimize the solution to run the best that it should. The biggest time saver and kind of value add here is with false negatives and false positives. Every email security solution is going to have those. With this incident response service, we're making your life much easier when those do occur. So the way that you can kind of think about it is that every email we're marking as malicious is going to receive some sort of confidence level associated with it. The majority of the emails, maybe 95% or so, are going to have high confidence as malicious and they won't need to be examined. There is a gray area, maybe 3 to 5% of emails where it maybe requires a second look to make sure that it is truly malicious. In that scenario, we have an incident response team that is proactively looking at those emails and making the determination, okay, this is malicious, it should be blocked, or in the case of a false positive, this email is actually should have been sent through, and they're releasing that email on our customer or partner's behalf, probably before you would even recognize that an email is being held up that shouldn't be. So we're kind of taking away this need for you guys to manage any sort of queue and releasing emails from quarantine because we're doing that on your behalf. That being said, I know US Signal might manage some of the time, or maybe you guys are managing the system, but Dave will show you, you also have the ability to release emails and kind of take this upon yourself if need be. But the incident response team is really there to help you and be an extension of the team. On the false negative side, which I think is also important to note, they're providing some value as well. So if we do have a miss, the incident response team is instantly identifying, okay, why did this miss occur? Let's make a change or a tweak to the system to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then let's go remediate that from everywhere it exists. So the IR team, once a false negative is identified, is going to go pull that email from the inbox where it got through. They're also going to look across the organization to see, okay, did this email make it through anywhere else? Let's pull it back. And then additionally, we're going to look across our entire customer base and make sure that we didn't have a miss at other organizations that we protect and pull that email as well. So again, the key takeaway here is really just that this incident response team is kind of meant to be an extension of the security team that is managing this system, whether it's US Signal or you guys directly, and help optimize and make sure that the system is running the way that it should be. You can move to the next slide here. The last thing I want to touch on before I hand it over to Dave is just some kind of third-party market recognition that I think is important to note and speaks to what we're doing. The first is with a study done by SE Labs, which is a company based in the UK. Every year they do email security vendor review. The last 2 years, they've actually rated us as the top email security vendor. They do a series of tests, all different types of threats. They measure you on false positive, false negative. So I think it's just important to note that we have been rated as the top vendor by them, and it's something we're proud of. And again, it speaks to kind of the uniqueness of what we're doing with the solution that we've put together. Additionally, Gartner, the last few years, has mentioned us in their market guide for email security. Again, they kind of speak to the fact that we are easily deployed into Office 365 or Gmail, while also providing a really high level detection rate and a good email security solution from a threat prevention standpoint. So it just kind of speaks to this idea of being a cloud first solution and really making this adjustment to cloud email services as everyone has moved there, while providing something that is super easy to deploy and is going to protect you from the threats that you're worried about. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover. This is just a summary of what we talked about, the key differentiators being detection, the speed and how that relates to scalability, the incident response component, and obviously lastly, the ease of deployment, the fact that you don't need to change MX record. Dave actually earlier this year created a script, so it doesn't even take 15 minutes anymore. It's the click of a button. We're creating all those rules for you, and you know, within 3 to 5 minutes, you guys are up and running with this solution. So I appreciate you guys listening to me. Now I'm excited to hand it over to Dave and actually show you guys the solution in action.
Thanks, Zach. All righty. So we have a few questions too. So I'm sharing the dashboard now. This is the Insights dashboard. This is the page that you would see when first logging in, but I can go from the Acronis level. So if anyone has a question and wants to see how to get here from Acronis, we can jump into that too really quick. There are a number of questions on the open question forum here, so I want to address those before we jump into the rest of the examples here, asking about how we handle secure emails. So that's a great question. So in regards to secure emails, typically the malicious ones, there's either a password or something sent inside the message itself. We can extract that or attempt to brute force the message. Now, for things that are sent from like a secure gateway, those messages would be flagged as unable to be scanned because obviously we can't log in as the user. We notify the user with a flag at the top of the message, and then that's where the user would have to either be careful with that, or they can extract the message and have it submitted for review before they open any links or anything inside the file. And then there's a question about MSP level whitelisting and blacklisting. That I will go into. The short answer is there's almost no need for you to blacklist anything. That's all handled by the incident response team. So there's a black cache and a black list that we leverage. The black list is something that's more permanent. The black cache is more of like a 30-day kind of list. Obviously, the longer the black list is, that would increase our scan times. So instead, we use a black cache. The cache is monitored. If the site is still up after 30 days, it moves to the black list. Because everything is dynamically scanned, also the need for whitelisting and blacklisting is dramatically reduced compared to some of the other products that you may have used in the past. Whitelisting is still something that's obviously smart to do because we are clicking on links. So we can whitelist just certain URL patterns, for example. So if you do have something that sends a password reset link or something like that, we won't click on the file for you. And then by default, we can set it so that you don't have to worry about high reputation domains like Microsoft sending a password reset or clicking on unsubscribe links. That's all done automatically. And then, yes, it would be a replacement for Defender. You can use both systems, but obviously the headache, just like having two antiviruses, is if something is quarantined, you have to track it down in what system is quarantining the item. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the dashboard now. So when you first log in to Advanced Email Security, you'll get a general overview like this. Now, in this view, some stuff is obfuscated. At the top here, there would be a drop-down. It is multi-tenant, so you would see aggregated value at the parent level, and then you can drill into the child object level, and the stats would change for each customer that you have in the system. We can see things like, now obviously this is some information we transferred and obfuscated from our primary environment, so there's a lot less data in here, but you could see items scanned and total number of incidents meaning non-clean emails. So that could be malicious and or spam. You see the protection level. Now the protection level is something that I think is really cool because this is based on the environment that you're located in. So for example, if you're in the US East environment, you can see the total protection level for all customers leveraging these engines and their performance over whatever time frame you picked. Right now, we're at 99.95% across the board and have been at that level pretty much since December of last year. So right now, anytime there's a false negative, that number would decrease relative to the number of emails that came in. So obviously 0.05% is an excellent false negative rate. The attack level will vary, but essentially it's a ratio between clean and non-clean emails. Now, this was asked earlier as well. Somebody asked how well we play with things like KnowBe4 and phishing emails. So there is a stat here for simulation. If you do any phishing sims with your customers, most of them are already pre-whitelisted and flagged for simulation. So anything that comes in the system, we can mark as simulation. Otherwise, you could just send a note to the team to validate that it's in there, or send a single email. And if you don't see it in simulation, we could just whitelist it for you. It only takes a few minutes. You could see spam item totals, and then suspicious would be anything under investigation by the system. The layers that caught the particular attacks. Now, in this environment, because we pushed mostly malicious stuff, these numbers are a little off from standard, but usually phishing would be the highest, but it still gives you an idea of the type of attacks that you're seeing. So, for example, from different verticals, we'll see things like certain verticals have a higher AV signature or code analysis relative to phishing than other verticals. So these are areas where, when you're planning what to train your users on, that's something to consider. If you see a really high number of AV signatures, maybe you want to do some additional training on attachments. Or if you see high phishing, if something was to get missed, most likely it's going to be phishing. So that's something to train against. The rest of the stuff here is going to be like top 10 list. But however, one thing I like to highlight is top attacked people in general. With this list, the first 1 or 2 people will be significantly higher on the list than everyone else. You'll see far more attacks for those people. So it's good to provide extra training to those people and kind of coach them on their online hygiene. The rest would be like top attacking domains, senders, impersonated brands, so on and so forth. But there's nothing to actually click here. So let's go into the actual scans menu and see what it would look like for day-to-day management. Now, again, if US Signal is doing this for you, or if you want access to your own tenant, or if you want to view anything, this is essentially what it looks like in the system. We can see all the messages that came in. We can filter by just malicious messages. We can get super granular here and say, hey, there's all these types of emotet viruses. Did I have any sent to my organization? And you can look for something as granular as seeing if you were attacked a certain way. When you come down here, you'll see some general evidence as to why something was blocked. So if you click on the message here, you'll get some general information as to why it was blocked. You could preview the message or check out a screenshot of it. You can change the verdict. So this is how we handle a lot of requests for users. We can either change the verdict. So for example, if I click this, I can mark it as clean, it would deliver. If it was clean and I marked it as malicious, we would run a request to remove it from the end user mailbox. So anybody that's set up in 365 or Gmail, we have the ability to remove anything that's been previously delivered from the mailbox. And then if we wanted the full-blown analysis of the email itself, we can click on this arrow here and it would dive into the full-blown report. So what I've done is I pulled up a couple examples that I think highlight each of the big differentiators as far as engines go. So phishing, BEC, and our HAP or sandboxing layer. There was another question about whether or not we would meet the security requirements in regards to if it's considered a sandbox for 800.171 controls. And I do believe it meets all that because it is opening in bare metal hardware. It's just the way that we're detecting it is a little different than a traditional sandbox. So just as an FYI to whoever asked that question. So this is what it would look like when you first open a message here and you're looking at a full-blown analysis here. So if we preview this message, you can see somebody shared a fax through Teams, but this is obviously going to be a phishing attempt. And if we take a look at the screenshots, you'll see the bogus Microsoft login page. You can see that they pre-filled the user's email as well. On the left here, we can see the extracted path. So this is everything that the recursive unpacker was either clicking on or itemizing from the email that came in. So remember, the recursive unpacker is going to click on links, follow redirects, rip apart files into individual components, and then each of those components are scanned. So that's what you'll see here on the left. We get that high level information that you had earlier. URL, for example, contains recipient's address is an interesting one because typically this is a methodology that's used to pre-insert the email and then make it look like the user's been to that web page before and that it's not a phishing attempt. If we scroll down a bit more, we get general information about the sender. So for example, we can mouse over this little lowercase I here and see who is information about the domain, the sender, whether or not they passed SPF or DKIM. So you get a DMARC check, the total malicious items that came from this domain, and just general domain information. You could see the return path, basically everything you would see in the headers extracted out and easily readable here. Sender profile information, so any information and intelligence we have on that sender and their reputation. General evidence overview here, and then you would see the headers parsed out below. Now on this page, there's also buttons. So to the people that asked about whitelisting and blacklisting, you can manage that from here. So for example, if this was a message that should have made it through, but somebody has like a bad SPF record and they're not fixing it for whatever reason, which is something that happens, you can whitelist them. Obviously, it's dangerous to whitelist anybody that isn't passing SPF. It is important to note also that our whitelisting does ignore DMARC rules unless you ask us to allow it anyway. So for example, if you whitelist the sender and that sender doesn't pass SPF, we're still going to block it. The only way to do that is you have to check a box and agree that you want to ignore DMARC checks as well, which is obviously dangerous, but we do have that extra layer of protection in there as well. Same thing for adding to blacklist. Again, you could change the verdict. Now, here's the part that's really helpful, especially to anyone that is going to be entering their own environment. The request investigation button allows us to help both you and US Signal or whoever's managing it reinvestigate an email with humans. So this allows for requests to go to the IR team and have them review the file or the items that you're interested in. Additionally, though, where this matters more to MSPs and to end users is going to be, there is an add-on for Microsoft 365 where you can report phishing. It's the default Microsoft one. There's also a Perception Point add-on for Gmail that can be added into the Gmail client, or if anybody's using the Gmail app on their phone, where if you report it as a phishing email, it will automatically open an investigation request with our team for review. So if you think that something made it to your inbox that should not have, we can still remediate that as well. Now, continuing on here, just as a couple other examples, taking a look at this example. This is a BEC example. So somebody asked earlier, what do we classify as phishing versus BEC? The last example would be more of what we consider phishing, where there's an attempt to steal credentials. There's an actual URL or some sort of payload trying to grab that information. BEC would be more of a similar type of request, but without using the URLs or any kind of payload at all. So in this request here, it's a user that's being spoofed that works at the organization, saying that they're sending from their personal email, trying to change their payroll. This is probably the most common BEC we see, where there's a lot of Bitcoin stuff that's going on too. Around the holiday season, you'll see the gift cards and stuff like that. But this is by and large the most common type of request, trying to steal a single paycheck. And the cool thing here is, while there's not a lot of super interesting stuff down here, because this is all going to be the same stuff that we showed you in the last example, I think the most interesting part is that the machine is able to understand the context of the message and actually have some sort of understanding of the context, so that the person works there, it's not their work email, that they're trying to change their payroll information. We also look for other things, payment scams, things like where someone's saying, I urgently need your support or something like that, and they're trying to compel somebody to do things. So that's super interesting, something that I find pretty neat. And again, when we look at scan times matter a lot less on malicious stuff because it doesn't get delivered, but this was 12 seconds. The last one to go through all that data analysis was 28 seconds. But again, on clean emails, this is obviously significantly lower time frame, but just wanted to highlight the scan speed as well. The last example here is one that I think is probably the most interesting and something that you're going to be the most interested in as far as protection. This is a standard email. It shows somebody being asked to download a document with a shortened URL. If we take a look here, though, at the recursive unpacker, we can see that there was the email. We clicked the link downloaded the zip unpacked, and there was an HTML file. In that HTML file was another zip. That zip then had a VBS in it, and the VBS spawned an executable. So if we scroll down here, again, same information as we saw in some of the other emails, the sender profile analysis. And then we have the HAP analysis down here where we'll have a GIF of it being detonated. So again, matching those sandbox controls. In this case, most of it happened in the background, so I'm going to skip the GIF because it's not super interesting. But what is interesting is taking a look at the instruction pointers and the dropper rules that detected the exploit. So for those that aren't familiar with droppers, it's essentially a way to get malware on a machine that has an exploit. It circumvents traditional antiviruses, which is how they're able to launch in the first place. And quite often they have no particular file type association or anything like that. So what we're doing is looking in the actual assembly code for any type of exploit or abusive codes. So those lines that match those instruction pointers are highlighted here for you in blue. So anywhere else that they occur, you can see where the exploit is taking place. You could see general behavioral analysis information, scan process information. So if any of you are familiar with like a Carbon Black or something like that, you could see the scan process launch. Now, I do have another example queued up that's a little more interesting. This one's very straightforward. Sometimes these can spawn out into multiple processes or multiple different threats depending on how many files are being launched. We'll show you that files that were written, dropped, deleted, read, created. Same thing for the registry. If this had a networking component, so say it's like a Mimikat style attack where it's downloading into memory, you would see the curl commands. So there would be a network tab here. You would see the curl commands. You would see the IPs it was reaching out to. And then additionally, if there was a macro involved, we also extract the macro and show you the macro that was orchestrating the attack. And again, the same evidence, and then the headers would be parsed out down below. Now, all this level of information was attained in 1 minute and 20 seconds. So that's something else that, again, even for a long scan, and again, scan time doesn't really matter because it wasn't getting delivered, but the fact that we can pull all of this data out and instill this level of confidence is pretty amazing in that kind of scan speed time. The HAP and the approach of using the processor analysis is so accurate, in fact, that if you guys want to check out perceptionpoint.io, you could see that we have CVEs credited to us even from this year. And this supports both Windows and Mac. The CVEs that we found were actually in the Mac OS. So those were credited right and found right inside the HAP. So before there was even a patch available, we were already blocking it for customers from entering their environment. The last piece here that I'd like to touch on, just for the sake of being thorough with this, is I want to show you how deep the recursive unpacker goes. So the recursive unpacker will follow links and redirects and all that stuff, but even going into, for example, this was an Excel file attached in an email, we can see that in this case, there were URLs inside the actual Excel. Those URLs were used to download the DLLs to comprise the attack. So we clicked on all of those URLs, pulled them out of the Excel, found the DLLs, ran full-blown analysis on that as well. So again, you could see an analysis and scan process for each of the DLLs. You could see the exploit in Office 2010, a different exploit used in 2016. Again, you'll have the files information. Here's that network information I was talking about, where you could see the curl commands, and then again, a macro analysis of what was orchestrating the attack, and all of that is provided for you. Now, the last piece of information that I'd like to share about this, and again, it depends on if you're going to be in the system or not, but we are easily accessible as well. Obviously, you can leverage US Signal. If you are also managing your own environment, you can leverage chat FAQs. There's videos inside the system here, as well as you can open a ticket right here from the top and reach out to the team. So for anybody that's got like a particular phishing sim or wants to validate that it's already added to our system, you can obviously ask US Signal, or you can reach out to us directly if you have access to the system. The last piece to note is under settings is where you will see the full-blown whitelist and blacklisting for the person that asked that question. So that'll all be under there, and it's pretty straightforward. You can just add somebody to the whitelist or blacklist and choose if you want to whitelist them from spam verdicts, malicious verdicts, or both. And again, there's that checkbox for that. Under VIP users, one additional protection. So if you have anybody that you're super concerned about business email compromise emails, now normally the engines train in about 2 weeks, but if you want full-blown protections right off the rip, you can add people to the VIP users menu. This is where you can add their name, any alias emails, and add additional pattern match protections to their BEC data. So all that happens automatically, but again, we can precede that data for you and help get a jump on those protections. Lastly, because it comes up, if anybody is curious, it's all available inside Acronis. You can configure the organization under Cyber Protect, Advanced Email Security, and you can access everything through Acronis itself. So when you're logged into Acronis, you can hit Manage Service on the organization. And on the left-hand side on the Manage Service, you'll see Email Security. There is an SSO between Acronis and our system, and that is how you will log in. So under Email Security, and then you can click the blue button and log in. There it is. So you can hit go to Email Security Console, and that will get you logged in. With that, I'm going to check the questions again and then wrap up the presentation here. So CAPTCHAs, the system is smart enough to go around CAPTCHAs and answer them in most cases. If it's not able to, we can certainly have notification on the message that it was unable to be scanned. But in general, we don't have an issue with CAPTCHAs. We don't see it that often, to be honest with you. Also, there are attempts for geofencing attacks, so where they won't let us open the email, they only want the email to come from certain organizations. So for example, they know we're a cyber protection organization, they try to block us out, and then we leverage proxies to be able to analyze those in those situations. Sometimes emails get stuck or they don't get my email. It's a nice size present also. Okay. I'm not sure if there's a question here, but I appreciate the comment. I'm sure it's in response to something, but they're just not contiguous. In the extracted path are obfuscated scripts, macros, deobfuscated, obfuscated. Oh, that's a great question, Matt. So right now, the obfuscated code is shown in the macros themselves, mostly because of resource constraints on ripping those apart. Now, if we can show information, we do. There is a revamp coming. It's currently being worked on to associate the family of the virus, and also a bunch of information about heuristic analysis to be displayed inside there as well. So there may be a change to that coming. I'm waiting to see what the results look like for that stuff. But right now, it is the obfuscated code in most cases. And then how does this compare to Proofpoint? So Proofpoint is a little different, depends on which product for Proofpoint you're talking about. Most of the stuff that's included here in our engines in Proofpoint is a significant number of add-ons, and they don't offer the incident response team. The differentiators are that Proofpoint would offer DLP, for example, or outbound scanning for certain things. Now, for 365 customers, we do provide ATO protections, and it is something that can be enabled for account takeovers, which is generally the reason you want outbound scanning anyway, other than DLP. And there may be an outbound product offering through Acronis early next year, just because of the number of people that have asked. But as far as protection goes, the inbound is obviously more important. Now, I can share with you as far as inbound scanning goes and Proofpoint, and I have a lot of customers that are using us behind Proofpoint. So they may have a couple of DLP modules and things that they're not comfortable ripping out. Obviously, with 365, you can supplement by just getting rid of those modules and using the DLP inside Microsoft, but it's a little bit more of a bear to get set up. So in those cases, customers don't want to totally rip out Proofpoint, so instead they put us behind Proofpoint to help catch some of the stuff that seems to be getting through the system. That's not to say that Proofpoint is bad, but using the HAP, we're able to catch a lot more stuff. And then the BEC engines is another thing that just traditional email security doesn't really do a good job protecting against. Again, the product itself was designed, our product was designed for more modern attacks. It's a newer product, so some of the stuff that we're using is a little bit newer and a little bit ahead of where some of the other companies are still trying to catch up to. So there are some additional values there. And then of course, the incident response team on the back end dramatically reducing those false positives. There's no need for those digests. So normally traditional email gateways will send out a digest at the end of the day, and people request to release spam or they try to release their own stuff. We don't allow users to release their own stuff. And additionally, we're automatically reviewing anything that's a low confidence block so that they don't have to request the release of it in the first place. Is there any logging system that does not, that can be sent to a SIM? Yes. So on our back end, we do support it's a plain text pipe separated for SIM support. We also have a REST API that's available, so you can query scan information, so you can get syslog data to a SIM, and then also use the REST API to query about specific scans. All right, and I'll hold it open for another second if there's any more questions. Otherwise, that about does it for me.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. And thank you for the panelists for sharing their expertise. So this does conclude today's webinar. If you have any additional questions or would like to learn more about US Signal and our products and services, please reach out to info@ussignal.com. Thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.